Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us at this special time today for the NSE. We're really happy to be starting off another great week. Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 885th New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, a programs associate here at the Rail, and today I have the immense pleasure and privilege of being your MC for a conversation featuring Wang Chunchen and Paul Gladston. We will conclude with a reading by Wang. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we are speaking from. And now to introduce today's guest and host. Wang Chunchen is the Deputy Director and Chief Curator at CAFA Art Museum in Beijing. He is Editor-in-Chief of the Chinese Contemporary Art series, which is published by Springer-Verlag in Germany, and has published numerous art essays as well. As a curator, he has organized many exhibitions, most recently In Thinking, the Intellectual History and Methodologies of Chinese Contemporary Art in Guangdong in 2020. And award-winning critical theorist and cultural art historian Paul Gladston is the Judith Neilson Chair Professor of Contemporary Art at the University of New South Wales and a distinguished affiliate fellow of the UK-China Humanities Alliance at Tsinghua University. He is co-editor of the book series Contemporary East Asian Visual Culture, Societies and Politics. His recent publications include the collected edition Visual Culture Wars at the Borders of Contemporary China from 2021, and we are very lucky to have him as an editor-at-large here at the Rail. Thank you all so much for tuning in today, and Paul, I'm thrilled to pass it over to you.
Many thanks, Eleanor and colleagues at the Rail. I don't know about editor-at-large, more like large editor, but anyway, many thanks to the Rail for that title. Look, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce Professor Wang Chunchen, who I've known for many years. He is those things that Eleanor has described at the Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing, and is an esteemed figure in the Chinese art world and beyond. I'm speaking from Hobart, historically known as Nipaluna, on First Nations territory, sovereignty over which was never ceded. Chunchen and I are going to talk about an artist. Today we're going to talk about an artist who you may not have heard of, Datong Dazhang. If you have heard about Datong Dazhang, excellent, but I think many people may not. Datong Dazhang was during his lifetime, as we'll find out, quite a marginal figure in the world of contemporary Chinese art within the PRC, but is now emerging as a kind of signal figure for the history of contemporary Chinese art and its future development. Sadly, Datong Dazhang is no longer with us. He committed suicide, not least because of his lack of fit with Chinese society and the art world within China, as we'll hear. However, a number of exhibitions, including the one we're going to hear about and one at the Power Station of Art in Shanghai a few years ago, of which I wrote a review, are beginning to put Datong on the map. And Chunchen and I think it's quite important to kind of extend that profile beyond China to the rest of the world, to the international art world, because I think Datong offers some signal issues of interest in terms of the way that we might want to see contemporary art going forward, not least in the kind of transcultural, multipolar world that we now live in. One thing I will just say is that when I wrote the review of the Power Station of Art article our past Station of Art exhibition on Datong Dazhang, I was a little bit scathing, not of the exhibition nor of the artist, but the presentation. There was a kind of attempt to present Datong as a sort of contemporary Chinese Van Gogh, a kind of signally misfit figure within the Chinese art world. And I thought that was sort of betraying the genuine suffering of a person who had health problems and also didn't genuinely fit with Chinese society. But I think we might be able to look again at that description through Chunchen's detailed discussion of Datong. So first of all, thanks, Chunchen, and over to you. And then we're going to have a bit of a discussion and then open things up to audience Q&A. So over to you, Chunchen.
Okay, so I like to, if we can open the PPT so the audience can look at the images of Datong Dazhang. Okay, here, as you know, just as Paul mentioned, in contemporary Chinese art, Datong Dazhang is the artist who is not discussed so much, especially since he's passed away. Even during his lifetime, he was a marginal artist. As you know, in China, contemporary art, if it is the term we use to describe Chinese art development, generally it refers to the period from 1980 until now. Datong Dazhang, okay, we can hold on here for the image. Why he's called Datong Dazhang? First, I just give you some basic interpretation. Datong is a city name. This city is famous for its Buddhist statue carved in around 400 years AD, 400. It's called Bei Wei, means North Wei dynasty. It is about 1,500 years ago. It's very famous Buddhist statues carved among the mountains. So that is why Datong becomes a very famous historical city. Also, this city is famous for its coal mine, the coal and resources. But Datong Dazhang, because Zhang is his family name called Zhang. Because this artist is very tall, over according to the general Chinese average height, he's very tall. So he's called Big Zhang. Da Zhang means Big Zhang. That is his basic name, Datong Dazhang. So Da Zhang, this poster is the exhibition. Is just now on display in Shanxi, Taiyue, or Taiyue, Shanxi province. Shanxi also is famous for Chinese many historical buildings, relics. In China, we have a saying: if you want to find some historical buildings, murals, any kind of such historical objects, you have to go to Shanxi. Half of such historical relics can be found in Shanxi province. So this province is very famous for such things. Shanxi Contemporary Art Museum just opened 1 year ago, just 1 year. So I'm so happy to be invited as a director for this museum. But for Datong Dazhang, actually, his last exhibition is 2016, which Paul wrote an exhibition review. And as we know, why we call the crossing, basically, crossing is the theme of this exhibition. The exhibition we showed the documents, the writing papers, the paintings made by Datong Dazhang, including some paintings made by his art group, some of his artist friend. Even we rebuild some installations according Datong's program or proposal. That is called the mail art. Why it is called the mail art, later we can have the brief introduction. And then we can go next image. As you know, Datong was born in, not here. Datong was born in 1955. And actually, this exhibition, of course, after he passed away, until today, there were, including this one, 3 exhibitions. The first one is in 2010 in Beijing. The second one was held in Shanghai 2016. So this year it is 2023. Because Datong Dazhang's art is quite different from the other artists. Datong, we can go next. We go next page. As you know here, when he used to be the soldier in the army. After the retirement, he came back to his hometown, Datong City. Of course, when he was a soldier, he was stationed in Yunnan province, far away from Datong. When he came back, he worked in the bank. As you know, in the bank, it's just the general clerk, not the artist. But it is in 1980s. In 1980s, China adopted the policy of opening to the outside world, including the reform of the economy. So many Western books, international books on art, philosophy, and including sociology, including the analysis of psychology, so on and so on. Many such books were translated into Chinese. So many people, including some of the exhibitions about the Western art. For example, in early 1980s, one exhibition is a collection by Hammer, the American petroleum industry, like as how to say, the boss, this is the Hammer collection. Just from that time, for the Chinese audience and the artists, they found the modernism or Western modernism in Europe. Also, a lot of young people, including artists, were ignited to be becoming excited to learn, to read, to look. Even they try to make new kind of art, which of course we during that period we call that modernist art in China. So when we describe Chinese art history in last century, we have a different period. From the early period of 20th century, many young Chinese students went to Europe, went to Paris, went to Japan, including America, to study art. They study the new art, or including the classical art, try to bring them into China, into Chinese art education system. So until today, that is the first period, because we have to know some of the basic background of Chinese modern art development. But in 1950s, as you know, that is the period China became closely with the former Soviet Union. During that period, China sent another group of young students to Soviet Union, including Eastern European countries, to study art. So this is two periods. This is two periods. The third period is from the 1980s, another period for Chinese to learn the international art. Of course, during the 1980s, they tried to learn the modernist art, including many young Chinese went to the Europe, America, other countries to study again. So we call that third wave of Chinese students study abroad to learn art. If we know such a background, we can understand Datong Dazhang, because as we mentioned, we can go to the next page, because we know Datong Dazhang just worked in the bank as a clerk. He didn't get any professional training in art school. He just learned that by himself. But he was inspired by the situation in 1980s, because during that period, including me, so many people learned the new knowledge, new ideas, new thinking, and new feeling becomes almost everybody become excited. Wow, we have found such a different art, so different from traditional Chinese painting, traditional Chinese realism. You know that we have that special term used to describe the art made during the 1950s, 60s, 70s. It's called socialist realism. If you know, get the main idea of this, or main general understanding of this term, so you can compare the art made with the 1980s quite different. Just because of this reason, so in 1980s, we have the new wave of art movements. We call that 85 new art movement. 那么Datong Dazhang lived in a city, even Datong is famous, but still it is the city not with so many important artists there, or artist groups. But Dazhang likes to read books, likes to learn some new knowledge, so he organized the art group, just as mentioned here, Zhu Yeguang, Ren Xiaoren, and the other two friends. So these 5 young people organized a group. It's called WR. WR in Chinese means 5 people, just 5 people in Chinese sound. So these 5 young artists, they try to, okay, just the Ren Xiaoren is the art student. He just graduated from the Shanxi University. He learned because he learned the new art in the art university. So when he joined after graduation, he joined the group. So they came together to discuss. Datong Dazhang, because he's a bigger guy, also because he is very more excited. He's a person can affect other friends. So he's the group leader. Everybody like to discuss, organize by himself, organize some activity. We can go next one. From this image, you can look at, okay, that is just during that period, this WR group, they did a lot of art discussions, image practice, including exhibition in their hometown. But in 1989, That year is very important for Chinese contemporary art history, because in February 5, the Chinese art critics, of course, some of them now becomes very important in Chinese art history writing, including someone Gao Minglu. He's later immigrated to America as a professor in Pittsburgh University. And in that year, why this exhibition becomes so important? It's called, in English, it's called Chinese avant-garde exhibition. But in Chinese, in its original term, it's called modern art exhibition in China, or modern art in China exhibition. So these two terms are a little different. When they put it in English, they use the avant-garde. Of course, mainly this avant-garde is about the young Chinese artists' artworks made by these young artists. And they have prepared for this exhibition for 4 years. Actually, they started curating in 1986. They just went to China to investigate how many young artists, young art groups made new art. They interviewed so many artists, collected many works. Finally, they have, of course, during that period, it's very open. So China National Art Museum, or we can call National Museum of China, National Art Museum of China, agreed to organize this exhibition. The only one, the first one, also we can say the most important avant-garde exhibition, which is organized officially by the National Art Museum. Because it is so important, why the news of this exhibition announced to be held in Beijing. So, 这个Datong Dazhang, including his art group WR, they heard this news. Of course, because they are very marginal, they were not touched by the curators. They didn't know this group, so they decided we went to Beijing. We go to Beijing to make some performance. Of course, they prepared this secretly, and just during the opening, on the opening ceremony, so many people crowded in the exhibition galleries. Suddenly, Datong Dazhang put on this white, white clothes. It is just a white cloth put on their body. Just put 2 holes on their face so they can look at. So because Datong Dazhang is big, very tall, so he's higher than other audience, so it is noticeably found by the audience, including by the people to secure the exhibition. So they try to grab the Datong Dazhang, including other 4 people. And so from the next page, we go on the next page. Oh, not here. And or maybe later people can look at the video future in somewhere. All this performance, all this walking, they just walking among the audience. So the curators, the organizers, including the security guard, try to grab them away. All these performances were recorded by Wen Pulin. Wen Pulin also is a young art student, art critic. He had a recorder. During the 1980s, recorder is a rare object. Usually nobody has such a stuff, such a instrument to record. But Wen Pulin had this one. That is why he recorded a lot of modernist art groups in 1980s, including 1990, he tried his best to record all this kind of young people's exhibitions, activity, including performances. So during this exhibition, he took his camera recorder to record. He found Datong Dazhang because people just become excited. So he recorded everything, including Xiaolu's shooting at her installation, a telephone booth. If without such a recording, we didn't know Datong Dazhang what they did. So just of course later during that opening, Datong Dazhang, the group were taken away. But finally, they successfully made their announcement as a kind of a performance in that exhibition. Just because of that, W5 group become known among the Chinese art world. Of course, the modernist art world. Later, when Datong Dazhang went back to his home city, but he still worked in the bank. Then he still began to think about how can we make a different art? How can we make the art from our own self, not just imitate what we learned from the books from others? So he just, from 1994, he just wrote the programs or proposals, how he thought art, what kind of art should be. Then he even wrote a poem, lot of a poem. Even he thought, I'm a much poet than artist. He just mailed all his proposals to any person he knew. Even he suggests any person when received his proposal, they can make that a kind of art or installation or maybe a kind of a program. They can do that. If they do that, that art belongs to this artist. He just want to open his art to anybody. So, okay, we go next one. Just in this year, just because Datong become known among the avant-garde artists, so in 1996, so this year is also important, including this performance also important. So Datong went to the Tibet. He actually wanted to make a performance. He wanted to carry a goat, a sheep maybe, across the river in Lhasa city, just outside of Lhasa city. According to his original plan, he wanted, after the crossing the river, he wanted to make the sacrifice with that sheep, because he wanted to use this performance to express his idea to the nature, to the history, to the religion, to anything he wanted to show. But just during the process of performance, when he arrived at the bank, another artist called Song Dong didn't agree with his plan to kill that sheep. So artist Song Dong tried to stop the action. They just fought each other. Even they quarreled during the performance. So finally, they got to the point. They didn't kill that sheep as one step of that performance. But anyway, this accident by Song Dong to make this performance become another kind, to make it means different. So until today, people often like to discuss this performance crossing. How do we regard life, even including the sheep? How can we think of art should be related to other things, so on and so on? So this is that is why this year's exhibition is called Crossing. Actually, we take this title from Datong's performance. We go the next one. And even Datong wrote a poem, made some performance, but his health becomes bad. People often to say, of course, it is said his mother has something wrong with his psyche. So in that year, even for Datong, you know, his teeth become loose, his hair even fall down, so on and so on. Then he took this photo of himself. That of course, this is a series of photos. He sent the photos to his friend as a kind of still his life, as a kind of a demonstration his life, his struggle for his life. So in 2000, he couldn't bear the illness. For today we can see that, but when even people say why he made suicide, committed suicide in that year. Actually, Datong Dazhang, during his past 10 years art practice, including his readings, his writings, his making art activities, he knows some things. Maybe we can say many things. It's only after his death, because people, including among the art world, the art critics, artists, suddenly found, oh, this is Datong Dazhang is a quite different artist. So we can go the next page. I just gave the brief introduction of his art career, and so here we can see the paintings made by Datong Dazhang. It's made the time just in the early 1990s. But when we look at this painting, of course, we can see, oh, this is an abstract painting. But such a painting, when Datong made this one in that period, it is very avant-garde, because compared to the main current of art practice, because that main current is realistic or realism, not this kind of things. But the abstract art becomes a kind of avant-garde. When people look at, even today, they don't understand why they make such drawings, such painting in such a way. What's that? They often like to ask. But for Datong Dazhang, because he read books about modernism, he read the poetry about modern thought, read the even modern philosophy. So in his poetry, we can know that even in Datong's diary or essay that he put down, we know Datong actually thought of a lot of things. From today's perspective, we can see Datong actually opened his mind to make art become free. This is free, of course, according to the title. He wants to use such a painting to link the past, the now, the future, so on and so on. For Datong, he didn't make so many paintings. Most of his artworks just performance. He actually realized most is in the proposal. Or we can call that program art or mail art. So next one, next page. For the exhibition in Shanxi Contemporary Art Museum, as you know, after Datong passed away, his writings, his documents, including his manuscripts, including some of his paintings, were prepared, were we can say stored, we cannot say collect, just secured or taken care, we can say that, by our critic curator Wen Pulin. So Wen Pulin becomes very important person. If without Wen Pulin as a curator or critic, Datong's manuscripts or his objects he left will be gone. Even Datong wrote his will to tell his younger brother, you should keep my stuff. You should so he very simple will, just tell his younger brother, you should not organize any funeral for myself. You just bring my ashes to the place I have already planned in Datong City. It's very moving, very sad story when we talk about Datong's passed away. So because his brother knows Wen Pulin is a person to keep a lot of Chinese contemporary documents, including videos. So he gave Datong Dazhang's stuffs. I mean the manuscripts, essays, writings to Wen Pulin. To keep that kind of things. Of course, all of these things in Beijing, then in Wen Pulin's home, they just specially build a warehouse to put all this stuff, to store all these things in that warehouse. Okay, so this exhibition curated by Zhang Honghua. Zhang Honghua is Wen Pulin's wife. She did a lot of how to say, we can call that to make the list all the manuscripts, to record all the details, informations for anything of Datong Dazhang's objects. So for this exhibition, they just they use for example, for this part of the exhibit is called the Right Soldier, the male art. The Right Soldier here are not a description, no description here. Why we call the Right Soldier? Actually, this is an ancient term, not a modern term, not a modern Chinese term. It's used in Han Dynasty 2000 ago, referred to a specially soldier to protect the dynasty and to protect something. So this is the old term. But it looks like when you read Chinese, sometimes it looks like a Red Guard if you didn't read it carefully. But this term is adopted by Datong Dazhang, especially refer himself to history, to anything without so much, because he want to think beyond the contemporary. Okay, we go to the next one. Here's the manuscripts the Datong left. You can see Yu Bingwei, Right Soldier. All this is print. This is manual prints Datong did. He cut on a kind of a special material, then printed on paper. Then he mailed all these printed proposal to the artists or friends. So he did that for several years, from 1960 to 1980, for several years. A lot of Chinese artists received these proposals. So later, Wen Pulin tried to collect these proposals because a lot of them already disappeared. So some artists gave this proposal to Wen Pulin for them to keep. So from this paper, we can see how Datong Dazhang think of ideas. Even the last one, he saw I saw the death. It is written in 1998. So often he discusses life and the death, belief and trust, and you know, so many such things. Later, when we read his poem, only one, we can feel how Datong think for something. Okay, we go quickly on next one. So we generally see this is his crossing. That is his plan for performance in Lhasa city. He want to kill the berry as a kind of sacrifice to the holy, to something holy. That is the original idea. You know, we know that Tibet is a holy land, so they want to go there to do this ceremony. Okay, next one. All this kind of proposal is Datong's from his mail art proposals. Next one. You see this program or this plan made by Datong in 2016 was made the real installation. It's a big table with a steel frame. Then they made a pig head on this installation. Actually, we showed this time in Shanxi. Next one. Okay, so in this part, we showed Datong's performance art. Next one. Okay, this is the basic the image. You can see this is the process. So on the second line from the first image on the left, you can see a person who taken Dazhang away of the gallery. You can the people just surrounding them. So that is in 1989. Next one. So this is the some performances made by Datong Dazhang in his home, in his in Datong city. If without photos, we didn't know such a performance. He did a lot of such just by their own self, without any news exposed to the public during that period. Next one. Oh, this is the exhibition, the site. So we hold the ceremony. Next one. From the photos, you can see some performance. The left image during the middle, you can see that is Datong Dazhang carried that ship across the Lhasa River. So his friend took these photos one by one. You know that during that period, not like today, we have the digital camera. They can take photos of anyone. They just use a film. It's about it's very rare. It's just 34 pieces. So they just carefully to take photos. Okay. The right one, that boat actually is Dazhang. He just take it behind that river. You can see the chimney. Actually, that is the furnace. What do we call it? After people death, they put their body there to burn them in that furnace. Actually, that is a factory. So he just put made a boat on the bank, actually refer to kind of a life's tomb, so on and so on. Next one. Next page. Here we just see even this is just in detail. You can see the pig's head. This installation. Next one. This is another. It's called a tramp. This is another Datong's proposals. We just dig this earth from the garden outside of the museum, And so actually from the window, you can look at that hole on the garden, because that is his Datong's plan. Any person can realize his proposal. So we make this as a kind of homage to Datong Dazhang. Next one. Yeah, this is user effect and boost. Also, so this we realized this in the exhibition according to Dazhang's plan. Next one. This is another one. Next one. You see, this is called pipe dream. Also, we made this according to Datong Dazhang's proposal. Because when you dream overnight, you found that everything's changed. This term is very special. According to Chinese history, somebody made a dream. When he woke up, he found everything around himself changed. 5 generations already passed away, So it refers to something changed quickly, even it means something you cannot realize forever. Next one. Okay, go on quickly. This document. This is we made the ceremony. We made the discussion. Next one. This is the opening ceremony. This is the poster of his image. That image is his last photo of himself. We know that he made this one. So this photo becomes a kind of icon of Datong Dazhang. He just put on overhead his hands, refer or point to something. We don't know what kind of things, and show his expression. Next one. Okay, so that's all. That's the basic introduction about Datong Dazhang, including the exhibition. Of course, from the website, maybe you can look at some images of his works. But anyway, because he wrote a lot of essays, including poems. When we look at his poem, we can see, absolutely we can see he's a poet. Because when I was young, when I was a student, I studied English literature. I have read a lot of English modernists, including ancient poems, including Shakespeare, including James Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot. So I'm very familiar with modern English poetry. So when I read Datong's poem, actually I'm moved. I didn't believe there's such a person who could write in such way, in such writings. So now I just select one poem, because he left more than 300 poems written by Datong Dazhang. We hope all these poems was edited, compiled by his younger brother, Zhang Xiaoque. Zhang Xiaoque, before he was director of the television bureau, something like that. So after his retirement, he just devoted his time to editing, collecting his elder brother's poem writings. So finally, he compiled all his poems. We hope someday, somewhere, Datong Dazhang's poem can be published. Let people to read it. When they read it, they can say, beside the artist, we have another man, is a poet, Datong Dazhang. So now, first I read in Chinese, later I read in English, but the English is translated by machine. Let us know how machine to translate a poem. 2000年的完诗我面前有3只手，其中2只手的消失 完全是第一只手不得已之所过。它仍在膨胀，从被它挖掉野猪的洞穴里能看到后面，那是另一片纯粹，比前面更透明。就像星期三不包括星期二，但星期二必定要取代星期三。所有的一切注定要凝聚在一个点上。这不是把灵魂放进酒缸里发酵，是确确实实的要敲出一两点火花，哪怕把我铸成模子，锻造成一头野牛，我也心甘情愿，只要是一个意外。茫然中，我的心更亮，凭着我坚强的脉搏，即使呼吸停止1000万728小时，我仍旧要说，历史是每一代人在同一时空、同一时间对同一问题的同一判断。我原打算追寻古罗马人的足迹，去丈量岁月，哪怕我当真的就在起点出现，纵然在漫漫的行程中有一两个偶然，就像女人的衣裳，穿着就跟没穿一样。我不想探求有没有真，而是想追问有没有假。就像随手捡起一把钥匙，便能打开任何一扇门。遥望盘旋在君士坦丁堡大清真寺天顶上的乌鸦，1只和100只有什么区别？我不懂世人想要验证什么。那掩埋在古突尼斯王宫废墟里的，不过就是一个金色的头颅吗？思想在哪里？难道还要让我忍一个瓶子吗？我乐于别人叫大疯子，也不在乎他们对我的窥探，因为从他们那里顺手就能拉出一大串希腊人的眼珠，每当忙环降临，它便金光闪闪。面对2000年的篝火，无人能说出它到底为谁而燃，但在每个人的心中都认为它只属于自己，它是每个人的成绩，它不是每个篝火相加。够了，到此为止吧，让记忆的石磨把一切都碾得粉碎，静等在20世纪的垃圾口，我们将得到一句完诗。Let me try read it in English. 2,000 years of dead bodies. I have 3 hands in front of me. The disappearance of 2 of his hands exactly what the first hand had to do. It's still expanding from the cave where he gouged out his eyes, can see behind. That's another piece of purity, more transparent than before. Just like Wednesday doesn't include Tuesday, but Tuesday must take the place of Wednesday, all of it, destined to converge on a single point. It's not about putting your soul in a vat to ferment. It's really trying to knock out a spark or two. Even if you cast me in a mold, I'd be happy to forge a buffalo as long as it's an accident. At a loss, my heart is brighter with my strong pulse. Even breathing, stopping 17,728 hours, I still say history is every generation in the same space at the same time, the same judgment on the same question. I was going to follow in the footsteps of the Romans to measure the years, even if I was actually there at the beginning. Even if there's a chance or two in the long journey, like a woman's dress, it's like you are not wearing it. I don't want to find out if it's true. I want to know if it's fake. It's like picking up a key. I can open any door. Crowds hovering above the zenith of the great mosque of Constantinople. What's the difference between 1 and 100? I don't understand. What is the world trying to prove? The one buried in the ruins of old Tunisian palace. It's just a golden head. Where are the thoughts? Do I have to throw a bottle? I like to be called crazy. I don't care what they spy on me, because you can pull a bunch of them right out of that box. The eyes of the Greeks, whenever the wild came, it sparkles with gold. Facing 2,000 years of a bonfire, no one can say for whom it burns, but in the heart of everyone thinks it belongs only to itself. It's the product for everyone. Instead of adding each bonfire, that's enough. That's enough. Let the stone mill of a memory grind everything to pieces, waiting in the garbage pit of the late 20th century. We all get a dead body. That's all the point.
Many thanks, Chunchen. That was wonderful reading, and I think an interesting extension of our usual practice at the Rail of having a poetry reading at the end of the talk or the panel. We've now had it in the middle, but well done. That was fantastic. Also, your presentation, I think, is a really good overview of Dazhang's work. One thing which I guess viewers might have noticed is that a great many of Dazhang's works, at least ones that are associated with him, have been reconstructed from these very brief descriptions and small drawings in his proposals. In many ways, he's a much more notional artist than even somebody like Duchamp. I mean, at least Duchamp turned a lot of his ideas into actual things or performances or artifacts that were displayed in his lifetime and afterwards. But in Dazhang's case, certainly for the show that I saw in Shanghai in 2016, I probably think 2/3 of the show, probably more, was of reconstructions, curatorial reconstructions. Could you say a little bit about that? Are there any particular issues or problems of interpretation in taking Dazhang's proposals and then making them into objects of display? Did that pose any difficulties?
Actually, yeah. Of course, the people sometimes will argue about this, because according Dazhang's proposals, he wrote many proposals or programs. His idea is any person, no matter who this person is, they can make or remake the objects according to his descriptions from his proposals. When you make that works belongs to this person, because Dazhang want to open art to the general public. Maybe this is a kind of argument. We like to see. We show the installation in the exhibition. It is works. The works made by Dazhang is by who? Who is the copyright of this one? But if it is conceptual art, of course, this is Datong Dazhang's art. We are just the person to realize it. So it becomes another process of continuity of his art. Any person can make that installation again and again. As you said, he looks like Dazhang. Actually, he thought a lot of things. Sometimes even for me, as the researcher, to read the theory or philosophy of art, sometimes suddenly I found Dazhang understanding, maybe we can use the Chinese traditional term, suddenly understand all of these links between art, life, reality, the world, history, the future, including anything. So he want to open this. So because usually people, artists didn't want this, because if this is my work, just I make it as myself, it's not your work. But for Dazhang, he didn't want to do that. Yeah,
that's excellent. We might circle back to that in a moment. I mean, as viewers, I think have also worked out here, Dazhang lends himself to sort of almost beatification as a kind of rock star artist. He's an outsider. He doesn't fit in with the system. He's a suicide at a relatively early age. This description of him wearing the same army uniform and without washing it till it fell to bits, has a certain kind of rock and roll cachet about it. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable, as I was in the review I wrote a few years ago about turning him into this kind of rock star figure, this Van Gogh of contemporary Chinese art. It seems to kind of gloss over a lot of the subtleties that you've discussed about his work. I mean, what is it? Let's get past that rock star thing. What is it that makes his art so important to contemporary Chinese art? I mean, just a couple of leaders. That idea of the cross, where he's looking to sacrifice an animal.
Yeah. Why we
Chinese imperial history? That's a really. Let me just finish and this blurring of boundaries between art and poetry. That's very much part of Chinese Confucian literati tradition. And what you've just said about the Duchampian thing, I think that's very important, because he's kind of handing over his artistic agency effectively to posterity. Could you elaborate on that? What is it that makes him special beyond this rock star image?
Yeah. From my brief introduction, of course, we don't know much about his works. Even Datong Dazhang only had 10 years for art practice. It's very short. Usually for the artists, if they just made 10 years art practice, what kind of art they can make? But for Datong Dazhang, that is why it is called rediscovered. Because after his passed away, why Chinese critics, artists, curators feel so moved, so even sad about Datong Dazhang. When we, for example, until today, after 23 years after his death, when we look at his writings, his proposals, or even the performance he actually did, we can compare Datong Dazhang's art is really important, because he didn't care about the market. He didn't care about the the worldly, something so worldly, if I use that term. And because he want to make something beyond the reality, beyond the moment now, because we are so strangled, or we are so squeezed in the reality. That is, that is kind of things. So that is why he like to discuss life and death, something transcendental, something transcendental, even spirituality. Usually it is so far away from the moment, or maybe before. Whenever we reread Datong's writings and his works, even we can compare his works to the international artists' practice, we can find Datong Dazhang. First, he devoted all his thinking, all his time to art, to thinking. Then his thinking and the thought is so closely linked to the general or universal pursuit for something we want to discuss or explore. So the more we read Datong's writing and his work, the more we feel his ideas beyond the moment now. Because now we want to see what is the real art. The artist as a person, how can they regard themselves related to the world? Not only say, I make the commodity, I make something, it is just for our general visual pleasure. No, he's for people's thinking, people's mind, or inside, or we can say that the inside of a person, especially during the Chinese modern society, because the modern China is quite different from the history, from the Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism. Even we can say we have that kind of influences, still we can have that kind of influences. But just during that moment, during this period, we can say everything in China is try to transform to a new models. But we don't know what kind of new model we should have, what kind of new culture we should create, what kind of a new future we will meet. But Dazhang think of that. Datong Dazhang thought of that. He put such thoughts in his writing. He put even his performances, even his proposals. If we want to discuss, to find the meaning of that kind of proposal, actually we can find Datong Dazhang thought a lot. Even they still have the have the significance for the moment now. It's not gone away, but when we reread it, we refine its new meaning, even for today. That is why we say, even me, Datong Dazhang becomes more important. We cannot say Dazhang because he's away, his art will be gone. No. So that is why we just we hold this exhibition, even we try to find out, try to publish all his writings. Then we compare to the international art world. Do we still believe art? We can say, if we ask such a question, if we still believe art is something related to our own self, to our own body, to our own life, we can say Dazhang is a such person. So that's why Dazhang is important. Okay.
I think that's a great explanation. I think specific to that, it's a lot of what you've described or shot through with your description. And even Dazhang's work is this wish to go forward while still referring back to the past, to a kind of aspects of a traditional Chinese cultural identity. I mean, this cosmological view that he suggests, thinking in big terms around life and death and a kind of bigger picture, plus some of the practices which seem to me very much related to sort of Taoist asceticism, where, you know, he's eschewing or at least ostensibly eschewing a relationship to commerce. These are things which have a particularity to China, and there are a couple of things in there. One is that comparing him to Duchamp is a bit invidious, when he's partly referring to that, but also referring to this different cultural register within China as a way of being modernizing or progressive. And I think that's important. It makes him very important, that he's a figure that speaks to the multipolarity of our current world, that isn't now so heavily dominated by Western conceptions of art.
Yeah, that is a big question. It's a bigger. I think it is a bigger challenge for the modern China, for China now. As for the culture, often we see China has its own cultures, but we often like to discuss how can we make, create, develop, or have, or hold a kind of a new cultures in China. What kind of things? Do we still keep the old one, traditional one until today? But actually, nothing new, nothing traditional. Because so many things come to China, come to the moment now. We often talk about this. And we need to make sometimes we say we need to make the balance for Chinese culture, including art. When we call contemporary art, what does it mean for Chinese background? When we describe the international art, what does that mean to China now? So it becomes conflicting. On the one side, some people say we need to learn, we need to absorb international art or culture, no matter where they are from. I don't use the term, just the West. But on the other side, people like to say we have so many such heritage as a traditional thoughts, traditional philosophy, traditional art. How can we keep that? How can we continue that? Because we cannot keep that, use that as its original way or usage. So just now, I think this is a period, everything is just in the process to be transformed or to change into another kind of things. Nobody can predict. Nobody can, even we cannot prepare what it is. We just do it, absorb, make it, do our best. We believe we have our own mind, our own thought. We want to keep our mind become quiet, become, not only we just struggle for what art we should have. Actually, art is our self. If we live as a true man, if we live as a true person, if we take in something, it is true. We believe it. We think it is referred to our own real situation. I think that is the real art, the real culture. We cannot take something or do something that is not linked to us. Even we need to thought. Of course, that is a philosopher try to discuss. That is artists or even the art historian like to figure out. So Datong Dazhang is such a person. Even his life is short, but his discovery, his exploration on this kind of topics, I think it is very worthwhile, worth being discussed.
Thank you very much. We need to leave a bit of time for audience Q&A, but I kind of like this idea of Dazhang being a spectral figure that comes from the past through into our future in a complex way. But Eleanor, do we have any questions from our lovely audience?
Thank you so much, Chunchen. That was such an amazing presentation. And thank you, Paul, for those questions. And thank you, Chunchen, for the beautiful reading as well. Our first audience question, and if there are any more, please do send a note in the chat or raise your hand. But our first question will be from Chloe.
Hi, Chunchen and Paul. Thank you so much for this incredibly informative dialogue. Chunchen, I'm wondering what resonates most about Dazhang with your students?
Dazhang's student?
Or no, just generally with young contemporary artists today. What do you think resonates today with?
Okay, yeah. Actually, a lot of young students or young new generation of young people, they don't know Dazhang. But from this exhibition, a lot of people become know Dazhang, learned. Even some people went to Taiyuan City, just look at this exhibition from Beijing. Even some people wrote the essays about Dazhang. They post their recording about that exhibition. So until recently, so many people discuss to talk about Dazhang. Even people say, we cannot forget Dazhang. Dazhang is something so important. So even there, it become a kind of a symbol. If we see we need a kind of spirituality, Dazhang is such person. So from our research, promotion, and exhibition, including our conversation, Dazhang becomes more and more known among the young people. For the younger or young scholars, they will continue their study. That is our hope. That is our plan.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer.
Okay.
Thanks, Chloe. I would like to ask a question to you, Chunchen. I'm wondering, what do you think Dazhang how would he react, or what do you think he would think about the way his work is resurfacing a bit today, or about the fact that there have been and that there are some exhibitions of his work and discussions after he's no longer with us?
Of course, even some people post something in their WeChat. They said, when Dazhang lived, nobody cared about him. When Dazhang passed away, why so many people to talk about him, to even make his exhibition, so on and so on? They call this is a consumption of Dazhang. No, but I don't think so. I do believe. I cannot guess how Dazhang thinks, but according to Dazhang's mail art, according to his original intention, he's a person. He wants to open his mind to share his ideas. Even he didn't regard himself as the person, as the so important. He just said, I'm the person, even I live in the remote city, but still I want to exchange my idea to other persons. So that is why he made his art plans to different persons. He wants any person to realize his artworks during his lifetime. Even, he said, even after his death, any person can realize to remake his ideas. So when we realize the exhibition, even we remake some works according to his plan, I do believe that is a kind of a realization of Dazhang's ideas. This is this is correspondence to his ideas. We can say this is his conceptions. So there's no contradiction. So that is why we do it. I'm sure from this exhibition, even the person or artists in other countries, if they thought Dazhang's plan is significant, interesting, they can still remake it. We can put it into English. They can make it anywhere, any place. Because I think Dazhang can become a kind of a symbol for Chinese contemporary art. Why we need art, especially for contemporary China? Dazhang is one of such persons who can make us think, ponder, meditate. Otherwise, everything will be gone, be superficial. Because Dazhang is not a superficial artist. He's a person, we can say, beyond the moment. Yeah.
Could I just make a comment? It's actually not about Chunchen, that was a great answer, but actually just kind of responding to something that Frank said on the thread about a journey away from the Cultural Revolution in Dazhang's work. That, of course, is true. You can imagine being a soldier in the PLA between 1970 and 74, probably quite a traumatic experience, which would have contributed to Dazhang's mental health later on in his life. But of course, it's not just a transition from the Cultural Revolution. It also, for that generation, it's about trying to realize the lost promise of the Cultural Revolution. Cultural Revolution promised levels of freedom and breaking away from established society and culture in China that were never fully realized. It was always reneged on in the end. And I think for a lot of artists of that 1950s born generation, it was about trying to refind and rework what the Cultural Revolution pretended, rather than simply to abandon it or get away from it, which of course some artists did. And we can't really see, I mean, I think Chunchen's point is right, that I wouldn't like to it'd be a bit of a stretch for me to say that he's a universal artist. However, I think he has some importance globally and outside of China, but it's important in that sense to do some crossing in that case, is not to see Dazhang according to Western models, not to make him, a 2.0 of Van Gogh or other, heroic Western art figures, but to see him in his own rather complex cultural terms of the kind that Chunchen described a little while ago, about thinking of Chinese modernity as being rather complex. How does one hang on to localized identities while also wishing to be modern, whilst also acknowledging that modernity has something to do with other cultures? That's a very complex question, which I think speaks a lot to contemporaneity and the kind of intensely multipolar world that we now live in.
Yeah, it is true. It's very complicated, but we need to work hard to make it.
Yeah. And I think some further work on Dazhang in a broader context out of China might be interesting in that regard. Because for me, he doesn't really answer questions. He raises them, and he raises a series of questions that raise other questions and other questions. So I think his importance lies in there. And the open-endedness of the interpretation of his work, because it's mostly about proposals, which leave aside, authorial intent, I think are very interesting for us today.
Yeah.
Eleanor, any questions? Oh, sorry, Chunchen, please go on.
No. Of course, we hope we can publish all the poems written by Dazhang, all his proposals. We can publish all his proposals to let the international audience or artists to know it. So that only from such Dazhang can become more well-known. Even we can have a more discussion or writing about it. Datong Dazhang, including his counterparts or the contemporary other artists, because we take Dazhang as one of such examples to compare and to explore, because we cannot say Dazhang is the highest point. No, we just he's the like the landmark. It's like a landmark we just look at, because we still go on for the art practice, even for our discussion. How can we make the art useful, meaningful, significant in the moment now? Because when I met Paul in Harvard, we have discussed a lot, because actually in China now, almost every week we have the discussions. We meet artists, we attend the art exhibition openings. Why should we have? Of course, we say art has its daily usage for the decoration of rooms, for the houses, for the market, so on and so on. But on the other side, do we have something just related to itself, to our own thinking, not so interfered from other factors? Can we focus on our thinking to make something important? So that is the big challenge. Sometimes people like to say we need to survive. If we want to survive, we can do anything. We just do anything pragmatic. Sometimes no. Sometimes you still become a kind of idealist. Dazhang is an idealist, absolutely. Otherwise, he couldn't think in that way, because his daily work is just working in the bank, but he make himself beyond his daily life.
Just maybe as a concluding comment,
Okay.
because I think we've reached our time. Somebody on the thread's asking, now what? Yeah, it's always a question of now what. One thing I would say is that there's a fair bit of writing out there that engages with these questions already. So this isn't a standing start just by discussing Dazhang, but there's a great deal of writing, particularly about contemporary Chinese art, which tries to engage with these complexities. I think one of the issues we have here, as we've tried to do with this particular thread on the rail, is make it more apparent to audiences, not only outside of China, but inside China. A lot of restrictions in China as to how this stuff can be read and researched. But there's a general ignorance outside of China, I think, as well, which needs to be addressed. And I think somebody like Dazhang is a good starting point for addressing those questions. So Eleanor, back to you. Thank you, Chunchen. That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, everybody here. Thank you, our audience. It's a pity we cannot meet face-to-face, just online. I do hope in future we can talk face-to-face, because beside the Datong Dazhang, we can talk much about other contemporary Chinese art. I think it is very important. I like to travel. I like to learn, discuss, talk about any kind of art from China, from international, from Australia, UK, Europe, America, anywhere. So make us become universal in the world. And no matter where we are, actually, we have the same feeling, same sad, same happy, same feeling. Why not? Just keep us as the same.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Chunchen doesn't, by the way, sorry, Chunchen doesn't look it, but he's about to retire. So he's free for booking.
Good to know.
We're the same age. He's retiring. I have to work till I'm 80. But anyway, Eleanor.
No,
I still work. Of course, I will work until my last day.
You drop down. Yeah, of course you do.
Okay.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Paul, and thank you again, Chunchen, for all you shared and for the reading. That was a really, really beautiful reading and so great to hear in both languages. Before we close today, I would like to hand it over to Fong, and he will be offering our last comment today.
Okay.
You should be able to unmute, Fong.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you so much. Chunchen, that that was beautiful. I'm sorry I had to take some phone call for meetings, but man, your English is better than mine. You articulate so beautifully, thoughtfully, and that was a delight. You should be teaching at Harvard or Columbia, Princeton, no, Paul?
Okay, I come.
Yeah, definitely. And Dazhang is lucky to have someone who really understand his work. That's what it's about in the end. Every artist needs someone else who can speak and write thoughtfully on his behalf. Everyone, and we know that. So what you've done is just exceptional. I can't wait to listen to the whole entirety. And thank you, Paul, for doing this too, being the thoughtful host as usual. I just love it. We at the Brooklyn Rail love it. And we relish this cross-pollination, knowledge and wisdom. And that's what we are doing. We're trying to understand where we start from information, and then it transforms into knowledge. And then finally, wisdom, which you are now. Paul and I are getting there quite soon, no, Paul? Maybe a decade. For you guys, for some of you, maybe 2 decades. But anyway,
Yeah, give me
so
3.
much. Yeah. Thank you. And good to see you all. Can't wait to see the whole thing. Really listen to it. And congratulations again. And grateful that you're both here. So yeah, we just feel thrilled. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fong.
Yo,
That was
have a good time. Yeah, have a good time. Let's meet in future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much,
Have
Fong.
a
That
good
was a
time,
beautiful-
everybody. Even Paul, everybody. Alina, Chloe, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Fong. That
Thank
was
you.
such a beautiful note to end on. And of course, thank you again, Paul and Chunchen. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring this NSC program and making our daily conversations possible, and for supporting our archive, which you can view on our YouTube channel. And this conversation will be there shortly, so you can watch it again. For the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has been a platform for arts, culture, and politics through our free monthly publication and public events like our daily NSC. Please check the chat for a link to donate to support our work, and join us tomorrow for a conversation at our usual time of 1 p.m. The conversation will be featuring Dineo Seche Bopape, Martha Joseph, and Jill Cassid on Dineo's exhibition projects at MoMA. And we will conclude tomorrow with a poetry reading by Gabriel Ramirez. And you can now all turn on your microphones for a moment to say hello and goodbye as we leave. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening, everyone, and hope to see you soon. Thank you again.
See you
Chunchen.
soon. Bye-bye. Have a good time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chunchen.
Paul, that was
Bye.
reading.
Thank you, Chunchen. Thank you, Paul.
very
Yeah.
much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
And
so
bye-bye.
Thank you for the reading also.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you for
that's
the
great.
reading.
Beautiful reading, translation also.
Okay, thank you. Let's do it the next
Thank you.
time.
Yes, keep up the
Yes.
good work. Hello. Yes.